Good afternoon. My name is Ethan Collier, and I'll be chairing today's meeting of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. Planning Commission members have received this packet in the mail in the last couple of weeks and have had the opportunity to review it in advance of today's meeting. And so from time to time, over the course of the next few hours, as we work our way through the agenda, Planning Commission does move pretty quickly. So I encourage you to follow along closely in the agenda. Couple of things to cover before we get started. First is that in each case, I will ask if there's any opposition present. If you're here and you have questions or you want to speak in regards to a case, raise your hand when I ask if there's any opposition present so that I can see that you're here. And then I'll ask if the applicant's present. If we have opposition to a case and the Planning Commission elects to doesn't take action on it, then we'll hear from both the opposition and the applicant. In each case, we'll hear from staff first. So we'll get the staff report. Then we'll hear from the applicant, who will have 7 minutes. If you're the applicant and it's your turn to speak while staff is giving their presentation, just so that we can speed things along, go ahead and come out of your seat and come up to the podium here on my left, your right, and be prepared to state the reason for your request and answer any questions that the Planning Commission members have. After the applicant's finished, they'll take a seat, and if you're here in opposition and you want to speak, then you'll come up to the mic, state your name and address for the record, and the reason why you're in opposition to the zoning request. I would encourage you to just make sure that what you're saying is new information. From time to time, we have a large group of people that want to speak in opposition to something. And in those cases, the first person will get up and tell us that, they have some traffic concerns or stormwater concerns or, what have you. And the second person will get up and say the exact same thing as the first person. And the third person will say the exact same thing as the first and second person. That isn't the most helpful thing to the Planning Commission members. It's most helpful if opposition, states clearly the reasons why they're opposed to the zoning case. And if it's already been said and it's now your turn at the mic, don't feel the need to necessarily repeat everything that we've already heard. After the opposition's finished, which is a total of 9 minutes, that's allotted for the opposition to speak. And we stick very strictly to that 9 minutes. So I will cut people off from time to time and make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to be heard. The applicant will come back up to the mic and we'll have 2 minutes to respond. Then Planning Commission will take action. And in regards to all the zoning cases that we're going to hear today, they all go on to either County Commission or the City Council. And I think there's probably some handouts that have those follow-up dates on them. They'll be on next month's agenda, November agenda for City Council and Planning Commission or County Commission. Brian, is there anything else I need to cover?
No, I think that's it. I think you covered everything. Before we get started, is there any opposition to item 16 on our agenda, which is 1823 Taft Highway, 1833 Taft Highway? There's a zoning case there. Is there any opposition to that case here present? Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. First case on our agenda under subdivision plats and variances is SD 2022-0033. And this is Prairie Pass Phase 5. It's located at 3601 Bill Jones Road and is a minimum right-of-way subdivision regulation. And it's a variance, and staff is recommended to deny this. Is there any opposition present? Okay. Is the applicant present? Thank you, Mike. Brian, do you want to give a Sure. This was deferred from last month. This is from the Planning Commission last month for deferral for the applicant. I think to meet with staff. We did not meet. I think that applicant still wants to move forward with a 40-foot right-of-way reduction. The request is 40-foot right-of-way. The minimum requirements are 50-foot. This is a secondary entrance for Prairie Pass overall development. Once you hit 200 units or more in the subdivision, you have to have a secondary access. This overall subdivision had a secondary access off of East Brainerd, but because of its topography and a huge water main force line, they have to shift that location to this location off Bill Jones. Here on the site plan, this is the phase 4 of Prairie Pass on your screen. You can see it looks like a little flag lot running out to Bill Jones. From the property line here, top of the circle to the bottom is Bill Jones Road. That's a flag stem of 40 foot. Here's an aerial view to show you what that looks like on the ground. Again, it's a flag strip out to Bill Jones with the development. Sorry, I lost my Prairie passes to the left. This is, again, is the secondary entrance to this overall development. If you see to the south of this flag, you may remember a couple months ago we had in front of the Planning Commission a large zoning case to go from A1 to R1 for a future subdivision at this location. It's not proposing to connect to this flag strip, but it could be once that right of way is dedicated and a road is built. Here's a closer view of what that looks like. Again, it's a 40-foot right of way proposed. Again, it's vacant land to the north. You do see some structures here. Then to the south, again, is that larger subdivision that staff feels that 10 foot could be obtained to meet the minimum 50 foot at this location. There are questions in subregs that we look at when looking at variances. Are there unusual physical characteristics or other conditions existing on the property which would cause practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship if these regulations are adhered to? Staff felt there was no unusual or physical conditions that exist on the site as it's vacant, flat land. There are opportunities for the applicant to attain additional right-of-way or additional land for right-of-way on either side to be in compliance with the subregs. Approving this variance would be in conflict with intent and purpose of the subregs. As the subdivision regulations state that the variances should not be granted because the design does not fit the required regulation. So staff recommended to deny this variance request for a 40-foot right-of-way at this location.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just add some context to that. I think it's appropriate to maybe have that discussion with the Planning Commission because this is the appropriate venue for variances. And I'll tell you, from a staff perspective, at least, the current subdivision regulations are 50-foot right-of-way. There's been some discussion about how that may be modified in the future to meet certain new requirements. And so I only wanted to say that, and I'll preface a couple of questions I have that maybe Mr. Price can mention. But I think, again, this being the appropriate venue to talk about variances. Again, staff level is the subdivision regs say one thing. This is obviously a variance from that. But I know a couple of things that came up that maybe Mr. Price can allude to. And I think some interesting issues related to this are whether there are any utilities that are being required in this right-of-way. One of the biggest issues in having adequate right-of-way would be access for utilities. The second thing would be drainage improvements that are needed for a new public road. And so there are always questions about whether there are utilities and whether they'll fit. And then can all the drainage be accounted for in whatever the right-of-way is being proposed. And then obviously this does provide secondary access. So that would be a benefit. But I only wanted to say that there are regulations that staff looks at that they've got to make sure that they conform to. And then if there are variances that are requested, this is the appropriate process. So I just wanted to make that statement. Mr. Price.
Mike Price, MAP Engineers. So in relation to the comments, Todd, that you referenced, there will be two utilities that should be in the right-of-way. One will be water, and I'm certain probably electric will probably run through there to have interconnectivity back to Bill Jones Road is my guess. So I do not know that for a fact, but that is my guess. The situation here is we have a 40-foot right-of-way. When this was rezoned several months back, when it came before Planning Commission, there was a 40-foot right-of-way, 40-foot width. Everybody knew that. It's all we had. I have talked to both property owners on either side. Both property owners said they are not interested in selling any land. We can build a county subdivision street meeting all county regulations within the 40-foot right-of-way. So we're not building a substandard road as a result of a 40-foot right-of-way. Next is the fact that we have to have this access to Prairie Pass. This is a paramount, absolute necessary to have the secondary access. So when you start reading through the conditions here, it's detriment to the public. Yes, a detriment to the public if we don't have it. So you absolutely do have to have this street in through here in a 40-foot right-of-way. Now, what I have been able to acquire from the two property owners is that they will give us easements as it relates to storm drainage and some pipes. I don't really need it for much other than that. Grades are pretty close to meeting the existing elevations out through there. So we're going to get some drainage easements from them in order to put in the storm pipes and in a box culvert bridge that crosses over Chestnut Creek. So given all those conditions, and as I look here, the approval is in the public interest as it relates to 3. Number 2 is that it should be considered on a case-by-case basis as it was in conflict with the purpose and intent of the subdivision regulations. Well, the subdivision regulations say you need a second entrance. That's what we're doing. And then the first one is where it says, well, you can just sort of get us to 50 feet. Well, I've approached both property owners. They're not interested in selling, but they are willing to work with us and grant easements. So I think doing all those, we check the box and we therefore make this a viable entrance that is in the best interest of all parties involved, including the county, going through and doing this. So I would ask that this variance be granted based upon those facts as it relates to the request.
Councilman Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, question. Hang on 1 second. Brian and Dan, does it make a difference if a agreement is constructed ahead of this variance request with the two? Does that change your opinion?
No,
It does not change your opinion.
But Ms. Dan goes through, I don't think it does. And then one question, the applicant stated that, yes, this did go through a zoning case for a rezoning to R1 PUD, and we clearly note on the PUD plans, a stamp, that this doesn't relieve you from any other standards. The zoning is different than actual plat review. So just to clarify that, we still argue 50 foot is required. What's the hardship here? I understand the applicant's saying other property owners don't want to sell that. Still got to be a 50 foot right away per the subregs. That's just some, planning commission can approve 40 if you so wish.
Okay.
But staff recommend deny based on things we've looked at in the review. This would set the precedent for future requests in the area if approved.
Understood. Mr. Price, do you mentioned the agreement with the adjacent property. Has that moved anywhere?
Absolutely. We're preparing the easement documents now to grant the ability to work on their property to put in the storm drainage that's going to be required to build this road. But the property owners are not interested in selling any right of way. They're interested in giving us easements. They're not charging us for the easements. They're giving us easements.
Which would put you at 50 feet?
No, sir.
No.
The right of way still stays 40 feet. So the county will have a 40-foot right of way. We'll have easements outside of that for the storm drainage. And as far as from a precedent standpoint, again, you're getting a county road to county standards built. The only thing we're talking about is 5 foot of width more on either side. That's really not, it's not going to keep the county from maintaining the road, having the road built to their standards. It's all there. It's just a width issue. That's the only issue that I can see that is in play here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I got a question. It seems to me that in some cases, particularly getting the second entrances in the subdivisions or the phases, different phases, we've allowed things like, I can't remember the subdivision, we allowed one to have a crash gate in front of it to allow secondary access. So if you looked at it from precedent, we don't allow gates in front of roads primarily, but we do allow it in secondary entrances. In my mind, this is a secondary entrance, and we're trying to, you're shooting to get more houses and more housing stock. And I don't think it's smart to let a 10-foot easement stand in the way of us doing it.
Well, and to that point, there are 40-foot right-of-ways in the city and in the county all over the place. So it's not like they don't exist. It's just you try to avoid them when you can. And we have tried to avoid it. I wouldn't be up here asking for a variance if the people were willing to sell at a reasonable rate. They're not even willing to sell.
Hey, Mike, I do have a question for you. I remember asking last month, but I don't remember the answer. Why couldn't this be developed as a private ingress egress easement and not dedicate it as right of way at all, and just build it, pave it, and have a private ingress egress easement and meet the subdivision regulation for 2.
So I wasn't here last month, so that must have been Derek who was here. And Derek was not familiar with the project as much as I am as far as that goes. The intent is to build a public road in through here. We're building everything else public. At some point in the future, honestly, what I think will happen is one or both of those parcels probably will develop. And when they do, they'll dedicate the right of way and we'll get to 50 feet somewhere down the road. But the road itself will be built to the necessary standards for today. So I think it's, again, in everyone's best interest today and in the future to grant the variance, because then everything's set up, ready to play for people to being able to tie on then to a public road versus a private drive.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Price, if we were to grant the variance request today, and you were unable to finalize your easements, how would that play out? Would you still be able to?
We would have to do a redesign, which puts everything inside the 40 feet, builds some retaining walls. It can be done. It would just become a more costly venture to do that. But everyone that we're working with has been more than amenable and good to work with. I don't anticipate that. But in the worst case scenario, we've got to
So
fall back.
you could get that done. I guess what I'm getting to is there a case scenario, or is there a scenario where the stormwater would not be handled adequately if you were unable to get these easements, or is that going to all be covered by existing regulation?
We will handle and we meet every other regulation, every other requirement.
Yeah. So I understand the staff's position in terms of they're looking at the code requires 50 foot right of way. I think, and we do have to be careful what kind of precedent we set, but in this circumstance, I think that we've always tried to encourage connectivity in the second entrances for emergency access. So I think this is a type of precedent I think could benefit the community. So I'd make a motion to approve the applicant's request.
We have a motion to approve the request. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next case on the agenda is the preliminary plat located at 3601 Bill Jones Road, and it has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? And Mike, where did Mike go? You're familiar with those conditions. It's just business as usual. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0034. This is lots 51 through 66. Revised lot 30, located at 2255 Tournament Drive. This is for a final plat and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0035, and this is the Reflection Subdivision Phase 1, lots 1 through 46, 59 through 104, located at 2207 Edouard Ringgold Road, and this is final plat and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0036. And this is Dallas Hollow Subdivision, lots 1 through 23, located at 9109 Dallas Road. And this is preliminary plat with a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0037. This is Beeson View Subdivision, lots 1 through 54, located at 1025 Beeson Drive, and this is a final plat and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0038, and this is Carnell Subdivision Phase 2, lots 1 through 19, located at 6810 Connor Lane and 6820 Carnell Way. This is a preliminary plat and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0039. This is the Inlet Phase 2, lots 22 through 36. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0040. This is Farmstead, lots 1 through 26, 30 through 80, located at 6800 block of Hickson Pike. This is a final plat with a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0041, River Park Farm Subdivision, lots 1 through 97, located at 3699 Faith Road. And this is a preliminary plat with a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0042, Waterstone Ridge Phase 4, lots 106 through 131 and 142 through 152, located at 4560 Inlet Loop, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, SD 2022-0043. This is Heritage Walk Phase 2. It's lots 204 through 254 and on and on and on and on. I'm not going to read all that. Located at 1516 and 1526 Jenkins Road, and it's a final plat with a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. First item under new business. Item 1 under new business, case 2022-0210, located at 806 Spears Avenue. This is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to RTZ. And the case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition? Okay. And is the applicant present? Thank you.
Receive opposition to this as well. It should be in your Google sheet.
Listed here.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Schultz, can you do the staff report on this?
Sure. This is case 2022-210. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to RTZ, residential townhouse zero lot line zone, for 2 single-family detached dwellings. There's 1 existing dwelling on the property. The property owner wishes to develop this into 2 single-family detached, or actually adding only 1 single-family dwelling. This is 0.27 acres in size. With 2 units, that's a density of 7.4 dwelling units per acre. Looking on the zoning map, everything to the north and west of this side is zoned R1. To the east of this site is manufacturing, M2. And to the south, immediately abutting the site is R1. And if you go further south, I think that's Peak Street, you run into form-based code zoning, which is ERA3 and ERD2. But just looking at this general vicinity map, there is no RTZ immediately abutting this property. There's no zoning history for this site, but there is some zoning history to the south along Peak Avenue or Peak Street. That property was rezoned from straight typical R1 zoning to form-based code. Again, this piece of property has a single-family dwelling on the lot. To the north is single-family dwellings and vacant land, and to the south is single-family detached. To the west is single-family detached, and to the east, this site's commercial. This property is about 180 feet to the west of North Market Street. Here's a view of the site. To the left of the site, the car is, that's the existing single-family dwelling. On this property, if this is rezoned, this is where the applicant would subdivide the property to put an additional single-family detached dwelling. This is the view north of the site. South of the site, again, you can see it's more single-family detached dwellings. This is east of the site, which is that manufacturing zone property. This is west of the site, which is single-family detached. This property is in the Hill City North Side Plan that was adopted in 2003. The plan recommendation is urban single-family residential, which is basically detached single-family dwellings. Lot size of 5,000 square foot, and building footprint smaller than 5,000 square foot, which is typically those urban type lots you would see in urban areas. The proposed single-family detached residential use is compatible with adopted plan and adjacent land uses. So staff recommended to approve with one condition: single-family detached only. Townhouses, zero lot line, and multi-unit up to 4 dwellings located on one lot are prohibited. So staff recommends approval of RTZ for single family only. The need for RTZ is typically on lot size and frontage. R1 has a bigger lot size and bigger lot frontage. So this comes to you with a recommendation to approve with one condition.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. We'll hear from the applicant first. Come on up.
Hello, thank you. My name is Jeremiah Reynolds. I'm here actually on behalf of the property owners, who are Dan and Rhonda Reynolds, who are my parents. They're unfortunately out of town, or out of the country, actually. They have a yearly, they work with an organization and have to travel out the country once a year. This happens to fall in that time period. So I've been working with them on this project throughout the whole process, and so I'm representing them. So quickly, I just wanted to say that we do appreciate the recommendation to approve. We have been in contact with, we've attended the Hill City Neighborhood Association meeting and been in contact with Grant and the leadership there as well. The general consensus seems to be that they are okay with what we want to do with this particular project. We also agree and would prefer there to be some kind of restriction on additional townhomes being built in the neighborhood. We are absolutely with the neighborhood association to try to keep it to single family, and we don't want to create a precedent or additional, Pandora's box down the road of floods of applicants trying to get in. We have been approached by developers wanting to buy our property to put townhomes on the property. We have turned all of them away because we do believe in the Hill City neighborhood and the kind of existing single family and community feel that it already has. So we at the end of this, we would actually like to request a 30-day extension to continue our conversation with RPA and the Hill City Neighborhood Association, just to make sure that everything is basically that we're not creating some kind of additional precedents with them. So that would be my request, and we're here basically for additional feedback and questions and those kind of things. So I think that's go ahead.
Just to be clear, you're asking for a 30-day deferral.
Yes, we would like to do that just to make sure that there was discussion at the last Hill City meeting. Basically, it seemed like the majority were fine with the project that we were doing. However, there was concern about opening up additional precedent in the future. And I understand that because, like I said, we've been approached by people trying to buy our property and wanting basically to level it all and put up townhomes. So we definitely want to keep that from happening.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, well, you've got some, you want to speak? Okay, come on up.
So I think it's
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is the first time I've spoken, so I'm a little nervous, but I'll try and state my concerns.
Could you state your name and address
Oh,
for the
yes,
record?
I can.
Thank you.
I have a little note. Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Pipicasa. My address is 802 Spears Avenue, so I'm literally beside the proposed change in zoning. This area is truly a single-family housing area. I feel, and also I was at the last Hill City meeting, and we did vote on it, and we opposed the changing and the rezoning. I believe there was a letter, I want to understand, that was sent to potentially Dan Reynolds from our president. Additional, as I said, this is a close-knit neighborhood. I think the rezoning would change the dynamics of the neighborhood. There would be additional traffic entering and exiting, would add to traffic congestion on a street that already has a street parking issue. A lot of the houses do not have actual driveways, so they do park on the road. Even though the proposed construction would have a parking area, I don't feel as if, and the committee does not feel in our last vote of the whole city, doesn't feel like it would be adequate space for the potential rezoning on the proposed build that the drawing was submitted with the application. I sincerely hope that the city will keep this neighborhood intact as a single family neighborhood. Thank you for allowing me to speak my concerns along with the Hill City Council.
Thank you. We've got Councilman Ledford and then Mr. Maiden.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question for you, ma'am, if I could. So in your comments, you mentioned that you wanted to make sure it stayed a single family housing in the area.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the staff's recommendation was to limit it to a single family house. Does that change your opposition?
No, that does not change. The rezoning from what the drawing looks as if that there was going to be, and correct me if I'm incorrect, is that there was going to be a single family home added between the already existing house there and potential two residents behind that would be potential townhouses.
Okay.
Am I incorrect on the drawing? That's what it appears to be.
I'm not familiar with the drawing,
Oh,
but
okay.
in terms of the recommendation from the staff, it would be to keep it as a single family home.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have the site plan that was submitted. Again, these are just conceptual. What I'm seeing is two single family detached dwellings on the site plan. Correct. There's one to the north on this site plan that is existing dwelling, and the one to the south is the proposed single family dwelling. Right. We don't have an urban residential zone. R1 RTZ has been that zone over the years, and that's why we condition it to single family detached only until the zoning code rewrite comes about next year. We don't really have an urban residential zone. R1 has the 60 foot of frontage for each lot and 7,500 square foot for each lot. We've Planning Commission, City Council has approved RTZs in Highland Park, other areas in North Chattanooga in similar situations.
And Mr. Chairman, just make sure she understands correctly. Where it says proposed RTZ at the back of the lot, I think that's just a label. I don't think he intends additional development in the backyard.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for coming down and sharing the result of your community meeting. Part of the process for rezoning is the involvement of a community, and these discussions, sometimes they happen late in the process. And so thank you for coming down and sharing that. Number one, I want to say that's very important. Number two, thank you for realizing the importance of that community meeting and what comes out of that for further discussion, clarity, and possibly a much better plan through collaboration. So I want to applaud both of you for that and taking the time that's responsible when especially when the community asks for it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to defer 30 days.
We do have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? The only thing I'll add is that, if we're going to have conditions on it, I think that the one thing that I heard from the neighborhood that we do need to take into consideration is the parking and these streets. I also am a Hill City resident, and these streets are overparked, and adding these units can add some additional parking load. And so it might be worth considering adding a condition that there be 2 off-street parking spots. With that, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is a mandatory referral, case 2022-0211. This is located at the 4600 block of East Macaulay Avenue, and it's for a right-of-way closure and has a staff recommendation to deny.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me. I think the applicant wishes to withdraw this case.
Is the applicant present? Is it the case that you would wish to withdraw? Okay.
Second.
We have a motion to withdraw, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case, item 3 on our agenda under new business is case 2022-0212. And this is located at 1304 and 1308 and 1312 Greenwood Road. And it is an application to rezone from R2 to R3. It has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? Besides staff?
And we did receive opposition in emails.
Okay. And is the applicant present?
Move to deny.
We have a motion to deny, and it has been properly seconded. Just to make clear that we're on case 2022-0212, and this is the Greenwood Avenue, Greenwood Road case. And I asked earlier if the applicant was present. Is the applicant present? Okay. We have a motion to deny, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0213, and this is located at 7725 Shallowford Road. And this is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to R4 special zone. And this case has a staff recommendation to deny R4 special zone and approve R3 residential zone. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, you also received, I think it's the back of your packet, is a letter from Grace Baptist. It's in opposition as well. You received that, I think, late this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is case 2022-213. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to R4 on Shallowford Road. Proposed use is multifamily residential or apartments. Size of the property is 4.92 acres. Proposing 100 units, and that's a density of 20 dwelling units per acre. Looking at the zoning map, this property again is zoned R1. There's a mixture of zones in this area. To the east is R1. Further east, you have C2 and R2. Most of that's in the county. To the north there. To the south, it's R1 and R2. To the west is R4 and R1 with a special permit for a PUD, an institutional PUD. And then further west is R4 for assisted living. And then further to the west of that side is R1. They do have R3 to the south west. Whether the zoning history this side, again, there's no, we had a request in early 2022 to rezone this from R1 to C2. The applicant withdrew the case. That was going to be many warehouses. Immediately to the west of this site, that R4 that I mentioned is a special permit for a PUD. It did have conditions on that for patio homes and assisted living and office uses only. And then further west in 2015, there was a request to rezone from O1 to R4. That was approved with 9 conditions. I believe this was a church. I think some of this was destroyed during the tornado about 2 years ago. To the east is Grace Baptist or institutional. To the south is single family. To the west of this side is assisted living, and further west is multifamily, and to the north is vacant. This property is about 965 feet to the west of Jenkins Road, to give you perspective where this is at. This is a picture of the site from Shalford Road. Another view of the site. Grace Baptist is to the right of the picture, and to the west is the assisted living in this picture. This is south of the site, which is single-family detached dwellings. This is the view east of the site, which is a single-family dwelling. Just beyond that is the church. And then again, another view west of the site. And this is looking down Shalford Road towards I-75. This is in the most recent adopted area plan, Area 11, East Brainerd Plan. It says draft, but it was adopted in May and by the city council. The place type designation for this was campus because it's primarily used as a church. Primary uses within this place type does include multifamily living or apartments. So the use is recommended in the place type through the plan. The request for multifamily residential is compatible with the Area 11 plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses. Staff recommends R3 instead of R4 because R4 does open up potential for commercial uses. And we've tried to hold commercial uses towards Gun Barrel and not in this general location. So staff felt R3 would be more appropriate at this location instead of R4. So staff recommended to deny the R4 and recommend approve R3.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Councilman Ledford.
Brian, thank you, Mr. Chair. Did staff consider any kind of density limit? I'm seeing absolutely zero conditions.
We did not, based on the number of acres and the density numbers in R3. It basically restricts to that number of units. I think under even looking at R1, I know you'd asked about R1, so I went ahead and got those numbers. Based on
I don't know
R1,
how you knew that.
you served a long time on planning commission.
Been here a
So,
while.
yeah, based on the current R1, just on gross, you can get roughly 118 single-family detached dwellings, or net is about 94. They're asking for 100 units in terms of apartments. But yes, you're right. We did not put a density on the number of units.
Okay. Did you use the site plan that was submitted as part of your decision for no recommendations or no conditionals?
Yes, we again, these are just conceptual renderings at this time. Could be more, less, depending on. There's some floodplains through here as well.
Right.
That reduce the numbers.
Okay. And does topography take into consideration any of that?
No,
You have
we
like
did
a
not.
740 in the middle all the way to 760.
We did not look at the topo on that.
Okay. Thank you. I'll hold for further questions.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, can the applicant come on up?
How you doing? Mike Bridges, Surface Architecture, representing the client in this case. Thanks for having us here. Client basically wants to own several apartment complexes in the Chattanooga area. Would like to purchase this property with the intent to put another apartment complex here in this area. We did meet with the community last week. We just to hit a couple of the talking points you'll probably hear in a minute. We're very careful about how we want to approach working with the community. We do understand there's concerns about traffic on Shalford Road. We do understand there's concerns about the density. We do understand there's concerns about security, both with the assisted living and Grace next door. These are things that we're able and willing to address, and we have essentially committed to address here in the coming weeks before as this process moves forward, and if approved, while developing the site plan a little bit further. I know that there was a request at the community meeting by Councilman Ledford and other members of the community for deferral for 30 days on this one, so that'll be brought up as well. I did address this with the client several times. The response I got was there's several other offers on the property, The seller was unwilling, or the broker was unwilling to move the closing date further back. It's a tight timeline. All I can do is commit to work with the community and make this as a feasible project for the district, for the community, and for the neighboring population. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. We did have a really nice community meeting last Wednesday night, albeit a little 11th hour, 48 hours before this meeting. So this was kind of dropped in the laps of community residents to have the opportunity to talk. And it was a very cordial and very opening and warm conversation. I appreciate you hosting it and letting the community be a part of this decision. So I think you would agree that we need more time to work on this, would you not, based out of that meeting? And that is part of the process that I alluded to just a few cases ago about how important it is. Now, what disturbs me is that those meetings go unheard. Those people and those folks, residents of that area on April 12th of 2020 went through hell, went through absolute hell. And I think, to be frank with you, it's a little disingenuous to slough them off for a closing date and not to give them the opportunity. You're only 3 weeks away from city council committee meeting. The things that we talked about in that meeting were very heartfelt. They really were. And I think that you agreed that we needed to fix some things. I mean, I have a long list of items that needed to be addressed. I think it's just not a good place for us to start when we have someone who just wants to get to a closing date. And I think that's not a good look for the developer wanting to be a good neighbor to folks who are recovering and trying to rebuild their lives in this area. The city is doing a tremendous amount of work in Drake Forest across the street. Grace is working so hard, working with FEMA, trying to get funds to rebuild the church. Thank God for what the leadership at Morning Point did in rescuing folks from their homes and getting them in safe from Morning Point. And I just think that the community deserves more than I want to get to a closing date. And so I will be asking for a motion to defer this 30 days because I don't think that I'm unopposed to the R3 zoning. I just think that the community really deserves consideration and respect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have opposition.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you'll have a couple minutes to respond after we hear from the opposition. If you're here and you're in opposition and you wish to speak in regards to this case, come on up to the mic.
Mr. Chairman, can staff clarify something to Councilman Ledford's question? I was so anticipating his question, I just got, I guess, confused on the number of acres. It's actually 28 single-family dwelling units can be built. It's 4.92. I calculated 20 acres for whatever reason. I was anticipating the question.
118, my math.
I know. Yeah.
No,
I apologize. That is 4.92 acres. That equals 29
It's okay.
dwelling units.
Yeah,
Just want to clarify.
I appreciate that clarification. I was doing some fast math.
See, I was jumping ahead to try to beat your
How do you
question.
go 2 stories with all these? We're good. Thank you for that.
My name is Adam Love, and I represent Grace Ministries that's next door to this property. First, I want to say that we are not opposed to the owners seeking to use that property. We are also very genuinely desirous of it being something that our ministries can be a help to those. It's not that we are opposed to that. We are opposed to the level of density that is being proposed to this project at this venture. I'm grateful that the R4 is pretty much off the table. The R3 still lends itself to some concerns. I have sent a letter. You have that. I'm just going to reference a couple of the highlights of things that deal with our major concerns. One of them, obviously, is the density that's involved, the impact of that. Our campus represents a school, so it represents a lot of traffic coming on and off of this. If you have driven down Shallowford to that part around the roundabout area there, it is already a place that at this point where our campus is not even functioning fully yet, you cannot access directions on that campus or on that road at certain times of the day, all the way back to Gun Barrel, all the way to the roundabout and beyond. And so once we become active again, it's going to continue to add more. And now we're talking about potential of another density populations adding potentially 100 more units to this, which again brings up some other questions that we have. That involves parking. What happens because of the current proposed that we see there, they're following your standards of 1.75 cars, but I don't think any of us have 3/4 of a car. And that also does not take into account visitors. If they are genuinely seeking to represent a generational aspect, those who are coming into the career field, maybe without children, even if the 2-bedroom, you are still looking at potentially of starter homes. You are still thinking about double incomes, which means that we definitely have 2 cars, not just 1.75 cars. Where are their visitors? Where are their friends? If we're talking about this generation, they have friends a lot over. And where are they going to park? Which means our parking lots are going to be probably parked in. Street, access to this. We have a lot of pedestrian traffic. What's that going to do to the passing through of this area? So that's an area that lends itself to the security of it, the density of this, without anything that keeps them entertained on their own property. Our concerns then has to do with what's that going to do when they see sport fields and playgrounds and other things. And that is pertaining to ours. We recognize that it will be our responsibility to secure that, but we are speaking now before this, asking the owner of this property to consider what they're doing when they're putting that many people in that high of a density without anything to occupy them on their own property. The other parts that we talked about were fire protection. We've already seen a case where there's access. We don't see how it is possible for this proposal to even allow for proper response in a fire situation. Where's the turnaround? How does an emergency vehicle get in and off of the property as is proposed? Then it moves to disparity and the sense that it does not fit really what's the general makeup of the neighborhood, the idea of the density and things of that nature, and that goes along with that, which we find then usually will lend itself to a degeneration of that, where typically you're going to find a decline in the value of that property because of the nature of where it's being planted. I don't know too many people that are going to want to live long term next to a facility that has Friday night lights and sound, playing football games and raising a family there, or even with that, which speaks to then a potential of a higher turnover rate. And we are just concerned that that could speak to a decline in the nature of our community. And so thinking through some of those things, the setbacks, then it goes into the stormwater issues, the tie into what we have already had to deal with and what we went through in the process of approval to get our properties where they need to be with the new regulations and things, and thinking how that's also connecting to it, another property, and what we've had to do to manage that in some of the grades and things like that, and then moving through that. So again, it is not our intention to say that we are opposed to a development, but we are very concerned about the level of investment that this would be on that very small piece of property and that close to some of the most densely trafficked areas on that part of Shalford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Franklin Farrow, Morning Point Senior Living, 6020 Arbery Way in Ooltewah. I'm not going to try not to say much what's already been said by Commissioner Ledford and gentlemen that preceded me. Just to say that we are a retirement area community. If you look at the area plan that Brian mentioned earlier, this might be in the area plan, but if you can see pretty much up and down the street is pretty much dedicated or oriented towards senior living, or those who are trying to have a quiet existence in the latter years of life. So to bring in a young adult oriented high density apartment complex would not be congruent for the area surrounding. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Robert Vass. I live at 2235 Tristram Road, which is in Drake Forest, and I sit on the HOA board for Drake Forest. I just wanted to come and echo some of the comments I heard. Obviously, living in Drake Forest, we've been through a lot. I've been there for 8 years. Our community is rebuilding, and we applaud the city and the efforts that they've really supported us in the repaving and a lot of revitalization going on out there. It's a much different community than it was 3 years ago or 2 years ago, if you remember. We're woefully concerned about traffic. Obviously, I know you hear that a lot. if you, even today, it's hard to exit from Drake Forest. Much easier to get in, but harder to get out. We have two entrances. One of them sits directly across from this property. And even today, with Grace not in full swing, there are times you literally wait 5 or 10 minutes to get out because the roundabout slows traffic. And I applaud the roundabout because it did improve things from the old stop signs that were there. But it slows traffic to a crawl. I cannot imagine if you add 100 more units directly across the street from our entrance, what that's going to do to traffic. So that's a big concern. If you look at this piece of property, it's 5 acres can be configured a lot of ways. If you look at the way this 5 acres is configured, it's hard to imagine stacking 100 units on that piece of property. It's long and narrow, and you have to say, how in the world are they going to do that? We are very open. Obviously, R1 would be our preference. We would love to see an extension of our community across the street. But as it sits today, it's very, very concerning for us, especially with the egress and exit. So I'll leave it at that. We are opposed to the proposed zoning. We would love to have further conversations. This was the meeting was dropped on us at the last moment. We did attend the meeting last Wednesday. And I thought we started some pretty good conversation. We would certainly enjoy continuing those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just address a couple things really quickly. Obviously, my heart goes out to anybody affected by the tornado. I don't want to sound callous in regards to that, but I've already had conversations with the owner, several conversations since Wednesday. I know it felt last minute, and I'll take responsibility for that. But the owner and my client in this case is open and willing to take the recommendations. They've already mentioned that they would compromise on the density. We know density was a concern. It hit 3 or 4 of these major items that were brought up. Just in brief phone conversation, they had mentioned already coming off of that 100 unit count down to 80. Again, we're open and willing to having any of these conversations. So I get the concerns. I don't think that a lot of the concerns address the overall or general point, which is the rezone from R1 to R3. I think once that's taken into account, we're happy to have these conversations. We want to create good neighbors. We want to add value to the community. So, demographic concerns, stormwater concerns, parking concerns, these things are all things that can be addressed at the architectural or site planning level. It's just things that don't get accommodated very often at a very schematic point like this one. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Payne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that I agree and support the idea of a 30-day deferral, but I do want, I think what I heard, it's not really him, the applicant saying he doesn't want to do it. It's the property owner. And so really, no matter what he agrees to, if the property owner won't allow it, then you could be signing up for something worse. I'm just telling you to be careful. I'm supporting what you think, but I do believe that sometimes it's out of the hands of the applicant in terms of what he is able to promise when he doesn't own the land.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I would agree to that because obviously he answers to someone. And I think that Ms. Bridges realizes too that there's a lot of work to be done. The concern is that the community is a part of this process. And I feel very strongly in never being, let a community be held hostage for a paycheck. And I think that's very important to note. And everyone should know that that's where I would stand in my district. So just because someone wants to do something and move quickly, as we stated in the community meeting last week, you may move on and get that closing, but the community will be left some of folks for an entire lifetime. So I think it does warrant a 30-day deferral. I think it's, and that's something that I would make a motion for at this time.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? I do have a question, not to put you on the spot, but with a deferral, we're hoping to have something accomplished in the next 30 days. what is it that we would hope?
So
I just feel like we need to give specific direction to the applicant.
So the conversation at the community meeting was, let's get together soon. Because when you look at, I know when we hear from here, oh, this moves on to the county commission, this moves on to city council in 30 days. Well, actually it doesn't. It moves into committee at city council in less than 3 weeks, or right at 3 weeks. Okay. This application has been in for 60 days. We just had a meeting on Wednesday night. So there has been plenty of time. That did allow conversation to have. And every single person I see here today, plus another 20 or so, said they would be more than willing to come back and soon. And I can see their head shaking now that they are willing to find a better solution to this project. So I would say that 30 days to move to that point now puts us at 30 days to come back here with a plan. And given the last minute meeting that was given, I think we need all the time we can get, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. This case on the agenda is case 2022-0215, and this is located at 3717 Grace Avenue, and it's an application to rezone from R1 to R2 and has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, RPA did receive a letter in support of this case. I think it's the Jason property owner who sent a letter. It's in your spreadsheet where they support the request.
Thank you. Brian, can you give us the staff report on this?
Sure. This is case 2022-215. This request is to rezone from R1 to R2 for proposed two-family residential dwelling. It's 0.2 acres in size. Number of units would be 2, and that's a density of 7. Look at the zoning map. Everything around this to the north, south, and east is R1. Further north, just off the screen almost, is RTZ. The proposed use was single-family detached dwellings, 4 units on that RTZ property to the north, but there were no conditions adopted at City Council. Then to the west of this site is manufacturing M1. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north is single-family detached. To the south is single-family detached, and to the east is vacant property and single-family detached. Then to the west is the railroad right-of-way. This is a view of the site. Another view of the site. This is an adjacent single-family dwelling that's on the next door to this property. This is a view looking down Grace Avenue. The site's on the left-hand side. This property is in the historic River Ridge area plan, which is adopted in 2020. It recommends suburban residential with the primary uses in that place type being single-family detached residential dwellings. This request is considered a secondary use in the Area 3 plan. It does not meet any of those secondary use review criteria. This request would set the precedent for future duplexes or two-family dwellings in this general location. Staff recommendation is to deny. It's also wanted to note in the staff report that in May of 2022, City Council adopted the ADU ordinance, so this property could be developed with a single-family dwelling and an ADU on this property. Still gets you 2 units. Now, the ADU you could not subdivide, but it could have an ADU on this property. So just looking at the zoning map and the land use plan, adjacent uses, staff recommends to deny.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, we'll hear Mr. Jones, and then we'll hear from you. Yeah, you'll have an opportunity as soon as he's finished.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Alan Jones. I am with Stone Creek Consulting now, but still working with ACE Engineering through this rezoning process. So first, I just want to applaud council for moving on back in May on the ADUs. I think that's going to make a tremendous difference in adding additional rental units in the city of Chattanooga. I think two reasons asking for the R2 rezoning. There is a precedent of the RTZ just north of this site that's already kind of been in this neighborhood. And also this parcel is actually 2 lots, so we can already build just 2 single family homes today. So with that, the request for the R2 so we can do a duplex product, and also just provide a few extra housing units in this part of the community. It's interesting though, when you look at the ADU, we're already allowed to have essentially 2 units on the property. We're just asking for 2 units that are just a little bit bigger, because an ADU is a little bit smaller rental unit, but the ability to put a duplex or a townhome on this site would just provide a little bit extra, a little bit better housing unit to provide 2 units on this site than what we can do today already.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Payne?
What is there a reason you chose to go R2 instead of RTZ?
Well, with the RTZ, you could actually probably get a few more units on here, but he's not one to really pack it in that much. With the R2, honestly, I thought the R2 was a better zone that kind of fit in this neighborhood context. So there's a lot of larger lots in this community, and if you go to an RTZ in this community, that'll probably change the dynamics probably a lot more. I think an R2 is a good kind of a transitional zone to help. There are. Yeah, so it's one lot, or sorry, one parcel, but it's subdivided. There's 2 of 45 and 46 lots on it.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, we'll hear from the opposition. You'll have an opportunity to speak. Come on up.
Thank you, RPA Commission. My name is Dr. Obi Ebe, Professor Emeritus out of UTC. In 2006, a realtor contacted me to buy 4 lots from Grace Avenue. I went and saw the big wood and took the gamble. I hired a surveyor who surveyed the land. And in the survey map, he put R2. And I hadn't decided what to do with the piece of land. But September last year, a young man flew from San Francisco to Chattanooga and said he saw that I owned the 4 lots there from the county records. I said, yes. He said, you want to buy the lots? I took him to the lots, to the land. He said he likes it. He flew back to San Francisco. The next day, he went to Atlanta from there. And then he called me 3 days after that place is zone R1, not R2. I went to the zoning office here to check, and it said R1. I showed them the map my surveyor gave me at the R2. That's aside. From my knowledge of urban development, which I had helped to buy in 2006 to deal with urban and crime. Wherever you have a predominantly low-class neighborhood, single-family homes, that's where I can put duplexes of that category income. I thought that the commission would approve the application of Mr. Jones. When I saw it, I was so happy because on my table, I have already formed to apply for the rezoning. So when I saw the city wrote me to come if I have any opinion about ASA engineers trying to rezone the place from R1 to R2, I was so happy. But when I saw it denied, I said, we're in trouble. So my estimation, it will fit Chattanooga and the Hamilton County better, serve the city better and the county better if that area is rezoned to R2. Because it's a purely low-class area. And that's where I can get duplexes that will fit the population there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just to be clear, you're in support of the applicant's request to rezone the property.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you do live in the neighborhood?
No, I live in East Reynolds.
Okay.
But I own 3704, 3706, 3708, and 000037.
So you own a number of...
I own 4 lots there.
vacant property. You own a number of
Vacant
vacant
property, I would like
properties.
to give the duplex for me if it is rezoned.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. You don't want to say anything else? You feel like it's all been said? Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I just have one.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jones, have you talked to Councilwoman Coonrod?
I've reached out to her. We've been playing phone tag over the past couple of weeks, but I will make sure I get in touch with her before council meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor Kelly.
I'm just curious, again, we were trying to get this light bulb to go on from the city around ADUs. If you've got two lots, why you wouldn't do two, RTZs or two single family with two ADUs? I mean, that would seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Well, with the since there's two lots there with the R2 zoning, we can actually put 4 units. As long as we have the square footage.
Yeah, as long as you have the square footage, you couldn't do an ADU with those
Correct.
duplexes.
Correct. And really at the end of the day is just looking at the economics of, do we want, 2 full-size units or do we want a full-size unit with an ADU in the rear? And just trying to, and really it's just trying to figure out, different parts of the city, where do those ADUs make the most sense? I think we're still trying to figure that out.
Any other questions?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the R2 zone is called the duplex zone. So,
well,
motion to approve.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, the R2 does allow townhouse units.
Yeah.
2 units or
Right.
or duplex, however you want to classify it.
So we have a motion
marketing
to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Item 6 on our agenda, case 2022-0216, located at 7777 East Brainerd Road. It's an application to rezone from R1 to C2. And staff has recommended to deny C2 and approve UGC. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the applicant wishes to defer this request.
Is the applicant present? Do you want to defer?
Motion to defer 30 days.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been seconded. But I have a question. Can you come up to the mic? What? I need to know why you want to defer. When was this application submitted? I do not like deferrals. I don't know if I've ever been on record saying I do not like deferrals, but I feel like I've said it a number of times. We have an application date for this application on what date? What day was the application?
45 days ago.
Okay, so we've had 45 days to get this worked out. Why are we deferring it for another 30?
Out for the zoning.
What problems would that be?
He's not getting the zoning that he wants, and he's going to try to figure out what he needs to do to get it.
Okay. So it's more in conjunction with the staff's recommendation for UGC.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? That's it. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0217, and this is located at 4649 Shalford Road. And it's an application to rezone from R2 and M3 to M2. And we have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Are you familiar with the conditions? Do you have any concern or question with them? Okay. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case is 2022-0218, and this is located at 4527 Hickson Pike. And it's an application to rezone from C2 to UGC and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Oh, okay. Here we are. Any questions or concerns in regards to the conditions? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda, item 10, case 2022-0221, located at 3102 10th Avenue. This is an application to rezone from M1 to R2. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. Did I hear a second? Second. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0222. And this is located at 3402 4th Avenue, and it's an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0223, and this is located at 1800 0208 and 1810 South Holtzclaw Avenue and 1304 East 18th Street. It's an application to rezone from R2 and R4 to UGC. And staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Are you familiar with the conditions? Thank you. We have a motion to approve with conditions. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is a mandatory referral. It's case 2022-0224. It's located on the 1800 block of South Holtzclaw. And it's a right-of-way closure and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 14 on our agenda is a mandatory referral 2022-0225, and it's located at 1800 block of South Holtzclaw Avenue. And it's a mandatory referral for sewer easement abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 15 on our agenda, case 2022-0226. It's located at 0 Fringe Road, and it's an application to rezone from UGC and RTZ and C2 with conditions to RTZ and C3. This case has a staff recommendation to approve the RTZ with no conditions and approve C3 with conditions. Is there any opposition present? I can't imagine. Yeah, I figured as much. Mr. Schultz.
It's the wording of one of the conditions. I think they're in favor of all the other conditions. Is that correct? Except 8. It's how this is worded in condition number 8. Said June 1st, 2022 to ordinance number 13475. Well, that was actually the date of the staff report back in June. The site plan date should have been April 18th, 2022 to ordinance number 13860. With that being amended, I think they're agreeable to all of the conditions as proposed with staff.
The only other thing I would say is condition number 9 already exists in ordinance 13860. So if we could just delete duplicates, but otherwise we're acceptable of the condition.
Well, this would rezone that. That's why that condition is being carried over.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
So I'll entertain a motion with clarification on condition 8. Yeah, just clarify that specific language in blue.
That's correct. And the ordinance number. Well, Barry, give you one thing to do there, Barry.
13860. We have a motion to approve with a modified condition on number 8. And I don't think it has been seconded. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Case 2022-0227. Item 16 on our agenda. It's recommended to deny. I understand the applicant wants to withdraw. Is it the case? Okay. We have a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0228, and this is located at 706 and 710 Manufacturers Road, and it's an application to rezone from M1 to RRF6 and RRV6, and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And in regards to the conditions, do you have any comment? It's the cool thing not to have comments. I don't know if you've picked up on that, but okay, we were. It did feel like that. Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, I have on the screen those three conditions. Condition number 1 is maximum building height of 5 stories. Condition number 2, again, the conditions 2 and 3 comes from the adjacent property. It was rezoned about 3 or 4 months ago. Adjacent to this property, continue those conditions over. That's condition number 2 and 3. Property owner will cooperate in good faith with the city, including granting fee title or easement rights to allow an extension of the Riverwalk to cross the property along the shoreline of the river at such time as the city is prepared to construct such extension. And number 3, if the city desires to construct additional public amenities along the river at this site, for example, picnic tables, public art, restrooms, the property owner will engage those discussions with the city in good faith as to the location, area needed, any conveyance of land ownership to the city to occur at such time as the city is prepared to construct such amenities. Again, those are very specific, and those came from the adjacent property owner back in June or May of this year. I believe it was a city council level.
Go ahead.
Sure. Tom Hazlett with Miller Martin here on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Schultz, would you mind showing thank you. So the same client recently rezoned the green shaded properties that are right next door to this site. That's the properties that we were talking about on the conditions that have been carried over. The applicant has no issues with conditions 2 or 3. We want to talk about the height limitation on this site. And the reason for that is ultimately the applicant would like 6 stories on this property, which would be permitted under the zoning, I believe, but for the condition. What the applicant would like to do, in light of now having the second piece of property under contract as well, it would like to stagger the heights between the 2 properties. A single uniform height across both properties, it believes, is not as aesthetically pleasing as if we have a little bit of variation in the height. And what it would like to do is have the 6 stories on the property that is the subject of today's rezoning. And then on the adjacent property, instead of having 5 or 6 stories, it would actually take that down to 4 stories with a rooftop deck. And so in order to accommodate that, what we would love to do is just tack on to the end of condition 1 or a maximum building height of 6 stories if 702 manufacturers is developed at no more than 4 stories plus a rooftop deck.
Can we do that, Mr. Schultz?
I don't know that you condition something based on what's happening with the adjacent property. The adjacent property, which is the green RV 4 or 6, that was conditioned at city council to 5 stories. He's correct. That zone does allow 6 stories, but it was conditioned by council to 5. In addition, if it's not conditioned to that, if you do RV6, you can go up to 1 additional story, basically to 7 if you go through form-based code committee. I think that was the thoughts at council at that time. Looking at some of the other C3s on the south side of the river, those were typically either 70 feet or 5 to 6 stories in height. I don't think you can put a condition on this piece of property. Well, the piece of property, yeah.
my recollection was that 5 stories also had carried over. So we came into this thinking that 5 stories applied to the green. Again, I recognize sort of the process question that you're asking about whether we can sort of tie one to the other. What we would like to do is essentially trade a story, not go 5 across both, but go 4 on the one that we already have 5 for, but then go 6 on this one instead of 5.
Can you submit an application between now and city council for the modified condition on the adjacent piece of property so that it could be, so we would, in essence, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission, but we could potentially approve today's request based on what you're asking for. And between now and this showing up at council, you would have an application in to modify the height on the adjacent piece of property. And that would run through planning commission and council, because we can't change the zoning or the conditions on the adjacent piece of property.
Well, and I recognize that. So I was trying to figure out how would we accomplish this without touching the adjacent zoning. I was hopeful that my language only attaches to this particular property. We're not changing adjacent. We're saying this is limited to 5 stories, or it's limited to 5 stories or limited to 6, only if the adjacent happens to be developed at no more than 4.
Yeah, I don't think he's trying to change the condition of the other one. I think we're trying to tie this condition on height limited to what happens on the adjacent piece of property. But my question is, what happens if it gets developed first?
What was that last piece? Mr. Schultz?
I think what I hear you trying to say is you want to keep this at 5 stories and add, or 6 stories if the next door piece of property is built to 4.
Because that's what we would do. We would do 4 next door. And
So the condition on the next door property doesn't need to change. It needs to stay the same at 5 stories.
If you're trying to protect the other piece of property by limiting this to 5, but he owns that piece of property, why would we not just give him the 6 stories and he can build 5 if he wants to? Or, if your whole protection is to protect the piece that you already own, I don't know why we're doing this.
We certainly would accept just eliminating condition 1. We were trying to do something to accommodate, but if it's easier to eliminate condition 1,
I move to approve with staff recommendations 2 and 3 and eliminating 1.
We have a motion and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if that would in essence allow them to go up to 7, is that what you
But
said
it's
earlier?
6 based on the zone. They can go in front of the form-based code committee.
Okay, so they would need additional approval to go
Yes.
to that. I'd just like to kind of make a couple quick comments on this one. Is one on the conditions number 2 and 3 that the staff recommended and that the applicant was good with. Excited to see that. I think that opening up that part of the riverfront to the community could just be huge. In addition to that, the applicant's request for an additional story, I think the riverfront is such a limited amenity that we want to try to max within reason, maximize that benefit and get as much there as we can. So I'm thankful for Mr. Payne making the motion to accept the applicant's request.
Very briefly, I mean, is it worth the law notwithstanding memorializing? I suppose these proceedings are to some extent memorializing this discussion and this verbal commitment for the 4 stories. To Mr. Payne's point, I agree that aesthetically this is the right thing to do. But should something change, it's certainly worth noting in some official proceeding that this was in fact the understanding. I don't know whether there's a way to memorialize this.
I'll let Dan defer, but I think Dan and I were discussing a few minutes ago on if you want to, if you're worried about on this piece of property, the 7 stories potentially, you could put a condition of 6 stories only. That way it could go to 7 on this piece of property. But I think what the mayor's saying is it's only 6 if what happens on this adjacent property. I don't know how Dan has any thoughts on that.
Put it in the motion, and if our future attorney doesn't like it, I guess they'll let council know.
Mr. Mayor, I certainly will communicate the point to my client.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hazlett, have you talked to Councilman Henderson about this?
I emailed Councilman Henderson before this hearing and asked if we met with him on a couple of occasions on the adjacent property. On this one, I emailed him and explained this is coming through and asked if he'd like to sit down and talk with us about it as well.
Okay.
Have not heard back from him yet, but
Okay.
I will reach out again after this meeting prior to council.
And the reason I bring that up is because this was quite lengthy conversation as it came through, I think, with an error reading 4 stories at one point. And we had to clarify that to 5.
It did. And Councilman Henderson had us look at on the southern side of the river, all the heights of those C3s, and that's where he came at 5, I believe, the council's made.
Right. So I knew that he had some concerns. So I would think this is a much broader scope. So definitely involve him in that conversation and address those concerns. But I'm glad we had this conversation as well. Thank you.
Any other discussion? We do have a motion with a modified conditions, eliminating condition 1 altogether, and it was properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is a resolution to amend the Walden zoning ordinance and delete the VC Village Center Zone and to incorporate a Town Center Zone and Town Center Overlay Zone and add definitions and to amend the C1 Commercial Zone. And the Town of Walden has requested to withdraw this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this was deferred last month. I think we have the city attorney here.
We have a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw the request, and it was properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Does staff have any updates?
The only updates I have, as I mentioned at lunch, we'll bring on the agenda next month several amendments to the subdivision regulations for the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County and other municipalities in relation to staff approval plats and subdivision review submittal and process changes that we've made over the years due to COVID. We've switched from paper copies to all digital. And we just want to amend the regulation to make that clear what that process is. So we'll bring those next month.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank everyone for being real diligent about their schedules and being able to be here and having a quorum. We do have a number of new Planning Commission members, including Cole Webster, but others that we will get the letters. We're from state, we feel, this month, and we'll have a big group next month. I think Karen also provided some of y'all some background books and other things on the Planning Commission. But we want to have a work session and continue to just keep y'all in the loop on some of the big projects that are happening right now, unrelated to zoning cases. Anything else, Karen? But we do anticipate having a work session at the end of this month, which we've kind of, I think it's the last Monday or last Tuesday of the month, where we will talk about the subdivision regulation variance procedure again, and then talk about form-based codes again, just for the public. So if anybody wants to come, we will advertise that.
And Dan, were you aware of the petition that had been signed by Planning Commission members in regards to the location of launch and the availability of bathrooms? And I think I've got everybody's signature that they're not coming next month unless it's resolved.
Well, Councilwoman Hill, as you see, wasn't here this month because she told me the bathroom went on. Actually, the bathroom was unlocked today, and the women's, the men's wasn't. But we have talked to Claire McVeigh about that in the county, and I think we will have that resolved. In terms of the meeting, that lunch location, I'm not sure if we've actually talked about that.
We do have all volunteers serving on Planning Commission, and I think it probably adds about, a little bit of time
To get over here.
Yeah, it would be ideal if we were having lunch.
And is there any strong feelings while we're talking about lunch about what we eat for lunch?
Only that it's fried.
We have.
Dan, don't go there for lunch.
Okay.
Don't go to lunch.
We do have a time on the agenda for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion we have a motion to approve the Planning Commission minutes of September 12th, 2022. And it was properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Payne? Thank you.
Thank you.
How does that work?
Hey, care.